and welcome to another video. This is a little bit early just because the 15th is a Sunday, so there's no mail coming, and I just wanted to sort of get it out of the way. Apologies if I don't sound super well. I do have a bit of a sniffle and a bit of a sore throat, so apologies in advance. And also, this video is going to be completely manga. I didn't get any anime or anything else this last 2 weeks. So, yeah. I'll just get straight into it and I hope you guys enjoy. First, from Vertical, we have the most recent volume of Devil's Line, Volume 9 by Ryo Hanada. This is a great series. I absolutely adore it. Every volume that comes out is just even better than the last. It really has an interesting momentum and executes its story really well. The specifics of the characters in this particular volume is really interesting, and I'm really looking forward to the upcoming volumes. It's just been overall a really great series, and I always look forward to seeing which direction the story takes in every volume. It's not exactly something that is totally predictable, and in that sense it breathes new life to a somewhat well-known scenario and premise. Yeah, it's just really good, and I cannot wait for Volume 10. I know it just recently came out in Japan, so we might be waiting a little bit, but yeah, it's just overall wonderful. If you haven't given this one a try, definitely give it a chance. It's pretty great. Next we start the Viz stuff with a Volume 1 of a series that has been out for a long time, and I've wanted to read it forever. I just never had the chance to, and that is Mitsuru Adachi's Cross Game. This is an omnibus containing the first 3 volumes, and the subsequent volumes are 2-in-1s. But if you're not aware, Mitsuru Adachi is basically like the godfather of baseball manga in Japan. Cross Game is no exception to this. He's more well known for Touch and some other series, but they're all quite a bit longer than Cross Game. And in saying that, Cross Game isn't, I mean, it's not bad. It's just more, Touch is more well known. I think it's probably his most well known work. Of course, this is a sports series following baseball team and sort of one character in particular, but unlike a lot of other sports series, which is only sort of hyper-focused on the sport itself, this series, like most of Adachi's series, uses the sport as sort of a foundation to then build characters off of. This series, as well as most of his others, are very character-driven pieces, so you're not necessarily going to find the same sort of flow and energy as something like the more popular current modern sports series like Haikyuu and Kuroko, Yomushi Pedal, etc. It's done in a very different way than I think people are used to with more modern sports shonen, but it lends itself a timelessness, and really that's why Adachi is so well known, so popular. All of his works are just things that you can really emotionally relate to, and again, there is a large sports element to it, but it isn't a sports series in the same way that I think other people would regard sports series. And yeah, so I wanted to read this for a very long time. Finally got the first volume, or first omnibus, and it was wonderful. I cannot wait to read more. Next for Viz, we have the obligatory Haikyuu volume, volume 16. Like always, great volume. again, very different from the previous series, Cross Game. This one is much more high energy, sports focused, very passionate. It's very fun. It's wonderful. Like I say, with every new volume of this, the characters are great. There's a lot of dimension to every single character in the series, not just the main character, the main team. You can really understand the motivations of everyone in the series, and it's done really, really well. It's by far my favorite modern shonen sports series. There are other sports series that I enjoy a lot too, but this one is sort of, for a weekly Shonen Jump series, it's so much fun. It's never bogged down by anything too melodramatic, and nothing really seems outside of the realms of possible reality. It doesn't sort of ass pull specific moves or anything, which with most Shonen Jump stuff is the problem, not just sports series. I mean, there is, of course, a layer of unbelievability there, but it's not to the levels of, like, a superpower. I don't know, maybe that's just a bias of mine, but I find that Haikyuu fun, funny, really great characters, and a level of rationality that isn't necessarily widespread within the genre. And of course, always looking forward to new volumes. The one volume, or a volume a month, is great. I mean, we're steadily catching up. We haven't caught up yet, but within the next 6 or so months, we'll be there with Japan, and then we'll have to wait like everyone else. Next, from Viz's Shoujo Beat imprint, we have Yona of the Dawn, Volume 8 by Mizuho Kusanagi. Yeah, again, another fairly popular series. I'm sure a lot of people are picking this up for good reason. It's very reminiscent of a lot of the mid-90s to early 2000s fantasy shoujo, and it's nice to have that sort of series being released, because this one, Yona, does it very, very well. This specific volume is sort of the end part of the anime, so I think the next volume will be almost entirely new stuff, if not completely new stuff from the anime. So now would be a good time to be picking it up if you weren't wanting to read stuff that you've already seen. Yeah, I like the sort of political aspects of it. I think how Kusanagi has written the conflicts that is very true to life and very morally grey. There's no clear right answer, and the fact that she has written certain characters to be the villains, but despite that still doing good things, or maybe even being completely misunderstood as to the true intentions of what they're doing. It's very interesting, and I like that sort of duality of the story. You can definitely understand the protagonist's drive and what motivates her and why she's doing the things she's doing, but at the same time you can also rationalize and understand why the villain is, or I don't even know if villain is the proper word, but why that side of the argument could also be seen as the correct one. It's really good. I think Yona has definitely, the character, not just the story, but has definitely developed into a much more well-rounded person, and I can only assume will do even more so in the future, and I can't wait to see sort of which direction this series goes, because I, like a lot of people, have I mean, aside from reading the manga now, have only seen the anime, and like I said, this is where it stops. So from here on out is all new stuff, and yeah, I'm pretty excited because looks to be really fun and funny, and a bit of action, a bit of the fantasy-esque spin to it. Yeah, I'm hoping that it stays good, and yeah, more great volumes to come. Next we have Gangsta Cursed, EP Marco Adriano. Volume 3, the spin-off story of Kosuke's Gangsta, focusing on Marco, obviously. These volumes take quite a while to come out. There's quite long breaks in between them, but as a sort of side story or spin-off story, I think, and I said this with the last volume, I believe, that Marco is definitely the right character to focus on, because there's a lot of intrigue there with him. He's a very likable character in the main story, has a lot of motivations, and reading this backstory just gives him an added depth that you wouldn't necessarily just get from the main Gangsta manga. It's really good. If you're a fan of Gangsta, then you should be reading this. It's it brings an interesting perspective to the Twilight's situation, and as well as the Twilight Hunters situation, why characters do the things they do, and sort of how this society functions or doesn't function socially. It's very interesting. Yeah, it's pretty great. I don't really have too much to say about this aside from, if you're enjoying Gangsta, definitely pick this one up, because it's just more of the same. Really good, really well written, really well developed characters. It is also written by Kosuke. The art is someone else, but it's great. So yeah, I would highly recommend this, especially to fans of the original series. Finally, for Viz Manga, I have another, I shouldn't say rebuy because I've never owned this, but I have read it, and that is Solanin by Inio Asano. Probably his most well-known and most accessible work. As an earlier piece, you can definitely see Asano flirting with a lot of the larger themes that he tackles in later works. But Solanin, I think, is definitely the most accessible for a reason, because the depressive sort of episodes of your early 20s and not knowing why, like, what the point of life is, or what direction you should be taking, what happiness really is something that I think everybody, regardless of, ethnicity, background, even age, has struggled with, especially in this more modern society where young people are sort of given a freer range of ideas and the possibilities of you can do anything, you can be anything, paired with the sort of realities that you have to work, you have to, function within society at a certain level, and at some point you have to grow up and sort of realize that some things aren't, they're dreams, and they aren't necessarily going to be realized no matter how much work you put into them. I think that's a very universal feeling, which is, again, why I think Solanin is probably his most popular work. Definitely is most accessible, and you can understand why a lot of people start with Solanin or really become Asano fans through Solanin. In saying that, this is a very hopeful book, or it's left very open-ended, which is very, it's very true to life. It's very reflective of how life really is, and the idea, the final statements and the final feeling of this book, because it is just one book, really, I think, does show that there is something to be gained by searching and not necessarily knowing what you have to do or what you should be doing. That mistakes will always, whilst being awful at the time, will help you grow as a person. And the idea that as long as you keep searching, as long as you keep working, as long as you keep living, there's always something more you can find out about yourself. You can always find happiness in other places. So it's very much a story about hope comparatively to defeat, which I find isn't necessarily a theme that runs through a lot of his other works. Even Goodnight Pun Pun or Girl on the Shore, they really don't have that same sort of optimistic look by the end of it. So I think Solanin definitely sets itself apart from a lot of Asano's work in a good sense, and that's not to say that his other works aren't great and wonderfully written. But if you want something a little less all-consumingly depressive, then Solanin would be one to try. I'm sure most people have already read this and already have their opinions and know, sort of what they feel about the series or the book. But if you haven't and you are interested in Solanin, if you are interested in Asano, Solanin is the place to start. But it isn't necessarily indicative of his entire body of work. So, tread lightly. Next we have a Yen Press series, and this is a series that I've been pretty curious about for a long time. This does have an anime adaptation, but I've never seen it. And the series has been complete in English for years now. I'm fairly certain, like a good solid 5 years. And that is Nabari no O by Yuki Kamatani. This follows, I think, like ninjas? I don't know. It's a modern, like, high school setting, but there's like ninja clans. I don't know a huge amount about this, aside from the premise was fairly interesting. And I've heard good things from a lot of different people over the years. I'm not a really big fan of like ninja stories. They don't really appeal to me. But this is I think a G Fantasy series, and so I was wanting to give it a shot. I'll probably do my first impressions on this once I've read it, but I just haven't had the opportunity to actually sit down and read it yet. If I like it, then that's great. If I don't, then it's not a huge loss. And yeah, I hope that I do enjoy it because like I said, I've heard lots of really good things, so fingers crossed. And then finally for Yen Press manga, we have the most recent volume of A Bride Story by Kaoru Mori. This is volume 9. And yeah, I mean, I don't think it's a surprise for me to say that I adore this series. I've been talking about it for years. I'm so glad that it just recently has now been getting a bit more popular and I see more people talking about it. It's just fabulous. You can definitely tell in all of Mori's works that her stories don't just use settings as placeholders or as sort of aesthetic choice. Everything that she writes about, she researches with utmost enthusiasm, and this story, as well as Emma, as well as like even Shirley, is definitely a exploration and a sharing of the culture that it's set in. Emma and Shirley, of course, being Victorian England, A Bride's Story being 19th century Central Asia. This particular book focuses a lot on Paria and her possible husband to be Umar. I think Paria is definitely one of the better side characters of this series. Amir is definitely the main character, but this is the series does focus on more than just like one bride. If you've been following the series, there's at least 3 or 4 other brides, including Paria, although she's not technically a bride yet. And I think out of all of the range of characters, that Paria is definitely the most likable, the most relatable, and certainly one of the most entertaining. I personally really like Paria because she doesn't fit into what is seen as the traditional perfect housewife. She doesn't really see herself as all that girly. She doesn't have the manners or the, sewing skills. She really loves making bread, but that's pretty much her only marketable skill for husbands or matchmaking. She's not like this big catch, and she feels pretty bad about herself because of that. She feels like she'll always be unloved and unwanted. But compared to like the twins from earlier volumes, she has a level of maturity that they don't. The Paria and the twins have a sort of similar free nature. Is that the word I'm thinking of? They're very flighty, the twins are, and sort of just fool around. And Paria, in some sense, is a bit like that. She doesn't care about what is sort of expected of young women, but at the same time she does care about it a lot, in the sense that she feels like she'll be abandoned and left alone her entire life. But like I said, she has a level of maturity that the twins don't. And then compared to some of the other wives who are more traditional, the like perfect, demure, can run a household, etc. It's nice to see such a balance of female characters with a bunch of different personalities, and seeing how they interact in their relationships or with other women. It's very interesting. So yes, I mean, I prattle on about Kaoru Mori all the time. I adore this series. I've been buying it since like volume 1, and it's just overall fantastic. Pick this up if you haven't given it a shot. If you don't love it, just even for the artwork, there is much more to the series than just the like art, but I know that that's what a lot of people sort of regard as Mori's strength. I would disagree. I think it's her character writing, but yeah, just overall fantastic series, and I can never wait for new volumes, because there's a long break in between volumes, and I just want more now. Is that so much to ask? But yeah, volume 10 is, I mean, not solicited. I don't think even Japan has volume 10 yet. But here's hoping we'll see it sometime soon in the future. Now for the rest of my pickups, they're all Yuri and or BL. So if that's not something that interests you, then maybe it's time for you to stop watching the video. But otherwise, the next thing I got was a 7 Seas manga, and that is Bloom Into You, volumes 1, 2, and 3. So I'm caught up with all of the physical releases for this series. I hadn't really heard much about this manga when it first came out, so I did give it a skip for a while, and then I did give it a try digitally after a wonderful recommendation from Whimsical Pictures. Thank you very much for that. And this story really is, whilst again, like a lot of Yuri, it has the same premise and same setup, is done a lot. The actual execution is done much more strongly than you would necessarily expect. It's very surprising in certain elements, and I really do enjoy how Nakatani Inio has written the series, as well as shown sort of the realism of the situation. It's not something that I could necessarily say is perfect, and I don't think that it's the best of the genre, but it's very, very strong. It has elements to it that you wouldn't expect necessarily from a Yuri manga, and overall it's just done really, really well, and in a way that you can understand and see how it's developed in that particular aspect. I don't know. It's just really good, and after reading the first volume, I really did enjoy it way more than I thought I would. I don't know. I didn't have bad expectations for this series, but I really didn't know anything about it. So reading it was a pleasant surprise. So much so that I did pick up the other 2 volumes, which I haven't read yet, so I'm looking forward to that. I mean, I've said this before, but it's great that we're getting so many strong Yuri titles now, and from the past couple of years. Seven Seas has worked very hard to expand the market, and the fact that other publishers are now dipping their toes into Yuri is a good thing. I don't love every Yuri that Seven Seas licenses or releases, but the sheer variety in their licenses means that there is something for everyone. And Bloom Into You definitely fits into what I like to see and read from Yuri. So yeah, I'm actually really happy with this one. I'm looking forward to the next couple of volumes, although I still need to read 2 and 3. I know that 4 and 5 have been solicited, so yeah, we'll be getting more, and I hope it stays as strong as the first volume was. Then with BL, we have volumes 3 and 4 of Kazumo Kodaka's Border. Now, I don't know if I've ever spoken about Kodaka, but she's a fairly well-established and popular BL mangaka. A lot of her stuff has been published in English. I haven't read all of it. Majority of it being from DMP or June. Her most popular series is probably by far Kizuna. Bonds of Fate, I think, is the full title of that. Which I have read and actually do own. And Border, I think, is probably a number 2. There's also Bad Teacher's Equation, which I haven't read. But she has a lot of stuff. Border is currently ongoing. There's 5 volumes out in English. I don't know if there's more or less, or more in Japan, or if we've caught up. But Kodaka, her writing isn't perfect, and especially her older stuff, including Kizuna, definitely plays into specific BL yaoi tropes. There's a lot of issues of consent in early parts of Kizuna, but you can see over the course of writing, I mean, Kizuna ran for a long time. You can see a lot of stuff, actually, a lot of the more controversial or problematic parts of the story being directly sort of addressed later on in the story, which I think is an interesting thing for a mangaka to do sort of after the fact. And I don't know whether that was just the changing opinions and times, but it's something that you don't see all the time, even in longer manga. So it's interesting. In saying that, I really do I like Border a lot. There's still issues, and there's still some things that are a bit iffy, but overall it's really, really interesting. It's done really well. The specific plot and how the characters live within that inside that world is very you can understand the character motivations. The story itself follows a group of young men, most of whom grew up together in an orphanage, and they run like a detective agency or a private investigator agency. They sort of help people with their personal problems. The main character, Yamato, previously was in the army, or was in the armed forces in the United States, and returned after the death of his lover. He, like I said, main character, he's gay and is sort of very open about it. Everybody knows. There's not really it's just sort of an accepted fact about him, which is, again, refreshing, having like an adult character not being unsure or tiptoeing around their own sexuality. But despite having the main character being gay, and there is sort of gay relationships throughout this, that's not really the focus of a lot of the plot. They do actually help a lot of different people with different things, whilst being interspersed about certain backstories and why characters behave the way they do and how they sort of found each other. It's really good. I think Kodaka has a real strength and maturity to her writing than some other BL mangaka do. Her art is also really great. I'll see if I can find... There's never anything too explicit in there, so I'm not like that worried. But see, like, I don't know, I really like her style. It's done really well. But yeah, with all June stuff, it's pretty hard to find and hard to get. I got these specific volumes from Book Depository, as well as volume 5, which I'm waiting for. And 1 and 2 I had to get from Amazon and somewhere else, I can't remember. But yeah, it's actually really good. I've read up to volume 4. So volume 5 is stuff I had read up to like the beginning of volume 4. So yeah, volume 5 is stuff I haven't seen or read. I'm looking forward to it. Yeah, if you haven't tried Kazuma Kodaka's stuff, Kizuna is like I said, probably her most popular series. Overall, I like certain aspects of that series a lot. But then the secondary couple, I'm like, no, thank you, please, no. And also consent issues and all that early on. But overall, it was a fairly decent, strong manga. But I wouldn't necessarily say that's the best work of hers to start with. I don't know. I haven't read a huge amount of her stuff, but I find Border, just as a newer story and sort of not having to play to the yaoi tropes of the late 80s, early 90s, really does give it an edge compared to some of her older work. So yeah, if you're wanting to try some of her stuff, Border's a good one to pick up, although it is a little bit tricky to find the volumes, like with any of June's June's releases, but oh well. Then we have Sublime's newest release, or one of their newest releases, Jackass by Scarlet Beriko. And again, one that I didn't really know much about, but I'd heard good things about Beriko's stories. And reading this, it was good. I was surprised at how much I liked it, considering like the premise. But early on, I did have to read the first chapter a couple times through, just because I'll show on the back. A couple of the characters, this character in particular and this character, I got them confused, and then there's this guy and another like blonde guy, not this guy, but another guy. I was like, who are they the same? Because they meet up, because this character and the other black-haired character walk to school, and then they meet up with this guy and the other blonde guy, and they switch so that these two are walking together, and then the other. I was like, wait, who is where? Who is where? What's going on? I was a little bit confused, but it sort of sorted itself out after a while. I read it again and was like, okay, now I know where everyone is in relation to everyone else. It follows two sort of high school friends. They're total opposites. One's like a hardworking guy with a scary looking face. The other one is a, lackadaisical, pretty boy, flirt, rich kid, who, through various circumstances, one ends up wearing his sister's pantyhose by accident, or like tights. I don't know what you guys call them, stockings. And then his friend is like, he has a real leg fetish, and then is like, oh my god, you have the most perfect legs, and thus they start a relationship. But it's not a romantic relationship at first, but then feelings get in the way, and then, it all devolves from there. It's quite fun. I liked a lot of how the story balanced the sort of absurdity of it, but also the sort of hopelessness of realizing you have feelings for a person, like a friend, and you don't want to change things, but at the same time things have already changed, but you don't want to lose that person because you value your friendship, and it's done really well. Like I said, I hadn't read anything of Scarlet Beriko's work before, but from this title, it's not perfect, and it's a bit of silly sort of premise and setup, and even the execution is a little bit mixed bag, but it's good. It's a solid read, and I'm glad that I did have the chance to read it. This is one that I would read again, no problem. It's sort of fun, but also it does have more heavy emotions to it. I really liked the brother-sister relationship, familial relationship, not romantic relationship, in this story. I think it was done really well. And yeah, I look forward to seeing if we get more Beriko stuff here, because from what I can tell, she's very popular, and from this book I can understand why. So yeah. Next from Sublime, we have the most recent volume of The World's Greatest First Love, The Case of Ritsu Onodera, a series that, I talk about every time I get a volume of this. It's not perfect. It's definitely, I think out of everything that I read, this is my biggest guilty pleasure manga. Yeah, it's just schmoopy and unrealistic and sort of everything that I think BL or people who don't read a lot of BL or yaoi think that BL and yaoi is. And that's not a bad thing, but it's just, yeah, there. Like I've said before, I far prefer this over Junjo Romantica. It doesn't have nearly the issues that Junjo does, but it does still have issues. But I mean, I like it. It's a good, just turn your brain off and just enjoy series. Yeah, I mean, it's so long for what it is, but you can understand like how Nakamura has gotten so popular and stayed popular with series like this. The later part, last chapter in this is Kisa's story, which is my favorite of all of the like romantic pairs within the story. So that was a plus. But I mean, it's good. It's all good. There's always something, even if you're not totally in love with the romantic main coupling, there's always interesting stuff going around, or in it, aspects of the editing process, or just overall how the business works and why these characters interact the way they do. It's interesting. I mean, this volume also brings up the idea of inheritance and family responsibility, which is all too realistic for Ritsu's situation. So yeah, in that aspect, it does that stuff well as well. And I'm glad that Sublime finally, or someone finally, decided to pick up and release this, because I think it is more popular than Nakamura's other works. Maybe Hybrid Child is more popular, I don't know, but it's definitely one that fans were asking for a long time, and we're not caught up with Japanese releases yet, I don't think. But yeah, we're finally seeing probably her number 1 or number 2 series getting an English release, and I mean, yeah, it's good. I do like this series despite all its faults and flaws. Yeah, I mean, I can't. If you enjoy something, then you enjoy something, and I can't rationalize it outside of, you know, it's good. It's a good just pass the time, turn your brain off sort of thing. And yeah, in that sense, it does its job really, really well. And like with all these things, I do actually look forward to new volumes of this. It's not groundbreaking. It's not something I would recommend to anyone, but I like it a lot, surprisingly. And so, yeah. Volume 9, I don't know when is going to come out, but I'm certain to get it once it does. Finally, for the BL and finally for the manga, is Kyung-ha Yi's most recent book, Dream of the Days. If you read Intense, then you will definitely want to be picking up this series or this book. It's really good. It's not nearly as like dark or intense as Intense was, but that was a 4-volume series. It did have the time to develop a larger story and develop the characters. Compared to this is just 1 volume, but it's done quite well with how you can feel the main character, especially his struggle with accepting himself and trying to figure out his sexuality, or whether or not he's just projecting things onto friends, or whether it's indicative of his sexuality and who he's attracted to. It's pretty well done. The art, like with Intense, is gorgeous. The later part of this book is very explicit. If that's something that is a tick for you, then I'm sure you'll be happy. It's really good. It's not intense, but it is still a great book by a great author. I'm glad that I picked it up so quickly. I actually got it from Netcomics' website, so I don't know whether or not this has been released for online retailers yet, like larger retailers, but it's definitely worth the pickup if you read and enjoyed Intense. They're two very different animals. This one is sort of a high school romance, but it's not like a fluffy, schmoopy, or super unrealistic romance either. It still has elements that you can see were also in Intense. It's just done really, really well. Yeah, it's really good. I'll see if I can find a non-explicit page. The artwork is wonderful, as with all her stuff. It's really good, guys. Yeah. I'm glad that we're getting more of her stuff in English as well. She has quite a few single volume series that I'd like to see and like to read, and hopefully with the popularity of Intense and this book, we will see more from Netcomics in regards to Kyung-hae. She's really great, and yeah, I hope we get more, because she's fastly becoming one of the standout BL mangaka, and it's nice to see sort of more manhwa being released. I know that that is Netcomics' specialty, and there's certain titles that they put out that I'd like to read, but not everything. I mean, manhwa, even within the manga community, is still very niche, so I like to support it with things that I'm interested in, and I'm just glad that we're getting more works from an author I really enjoy. So with that, that's all the stuff that I got for these 2 weeks of, God, what is it? October? Jesus. The year's gone so fast. But I think 16 volumes of manga, which is, I mean, a huge amount personally. But yeah, I got some great new releases. I got some volume 1s from stuff that, or started some series that I wanted to try for a long time. Got a lot of BL this last week, especially, sort of just by coincidence. I don't know why it all came on the same day, but just interesting timing by my postal service. But yeah, I hope everyone enjoyed. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll catch you in the next video, guys. Bye till then.